All right, so we're diving into the world of Balen Shah, from rapping engineer to Kathmandu's mayor. He's definitely not your typical politician. And what we're going to unpack today is whether this unconventional path can actually lead to lasting change in Kathmandu. Is this a temporary shakeup or a real revolution? Let's find out.
I think what makes Balen Shah so fascinating is that he embodies a lot of the anxieties and hopes people have about politics today. He's young, tech-savvy, and not afraid to call out the establishment, which clearly resonated with voters in the 2022 election.
Yeah, 38.6% of the vote for an independent candidate. That's pretty unheard of. What do you think, besides his background, really drove that desire for change?
Well, Kathmandu has been grappling with the same issues for decades. Poverty, pollution, inadequate infrastructure. And there's a sense that traditional political parties haven't been able to deliver. Balen Shah tapped into that frustration and offered a vision of a different future, one that appealed especially to younger voters.
And he didn't waste any time putting that vision into action. One of the most talked about things he did was start live streaming municipal meetings. Transparency is a big part of his platform, right?
Absolutely. It's about holding the government accountable and giving citizens a window into how decisions are made. It's a trend we're seeing globally, this move towards more open government. And Balen Shah is really pushing the boundaries in Kathmandu.
It's a bold move, that's for sure. But I imagine not everyone is thrilled about having their every decision scrutinized. What's been the reaction so far?
It's been mixed, predictably. Some see it as a vital step towards greater accountability, while others criticize it as a publicity stunt, or a way to bypass established bureaucratic procedures. Only time will tell what the long-term impact will be.
Yeah, another area where he's taken decisive action is Kathmandu's notorious garbage crisis. He brought in private companies to handle waste management, a move that seemed to be informed by his engineering background.
Yeah, it's interesting because it reflects a broader global debate about the role of private companies in public services. On the one hand, you have the potential for greater efficiency and innovation, but there are also concerns about accountability and whether private companies will prioritize profit over the public good.
Yeah, it's a complex issue. And it'll be interesting to see how it plays out in Kathmandu. But I know there's another initiative that really grabbed people's attention, the demolition of illegal structures, even some encroaching on the Takucha River.
That was definitely a controversial move. On the surface, it seems like a clear-cut case of enforcing the law and reclaiming public space. But you have to consider the potential backlash from those who were affected, especially small business owners who may have been operating in those structures for years.
So it's a balancing act
Yeah.
between revitalization and protecting the livelihoods of those who depend on the existing infrastructure. Were there any other initiatives that faced this kind of pushback?
Well, his Textbook-Free Friday initiative in schools also generated a lot of discussion. The idea is to shift away from rote learning and focus on practical skills. But it raises questions about how you measure the effectiveness of such a program and whether it adequately prepares students for higher education.
It seems like with every move Balen Shah makes, there's a ripple effect, a wave of debate and discussion that goes beyond the immediate action. Is that part of what makes him such a compelling figure?
Absolutely. He's not just changing policies, he's changing the conversation. He's challenging assumptions about what a leader should be and how they should operate. And that's incredibly powerful, especially in a city like Kathmandu that's hungry for change.
It's interesting how some of the things that draw criticism towards Balen Shah are the very things that make him so appealing to his supporters.
Yeah, that duality is really at the heart of his appeal. You know, his strict, no-nonsense approach can be seen as both a strength and a weakness.
Yeah, critics might say that he's too confrontational,
Yeah.
but his supporters view it as a sign that he's actually getting things done.
Exactly. In a system where progress has often been slow and bureaucratic, his decisiveness can be seen as refreshing. You know, people are tired of empty promises, and they see Balen Shah as someone who's willing to take action, even if it ruffles some feathers.
And that same logic applies to his lack of political experience.
Mm-hmm.
While some might see it as a liability, others view it as a sign that he's not beholden to the old ways of doing things.
It all comes down to perspective. His supporters view his outsider status as an asset. They see him as someone who can bring fresh ideas and challenge the established power structures.
It's like he's a mirror reflecting the hopes and anxieties people have about the future of Kathmandu. Do you think he's aware of this impact he has? That he's become a symbol of something larger than himself?
It's hard to say for sure, but I think he understands the significance of his position. He's tapping into a global desire for authenticity and change in leadership. People are looking for leaders who are more relatable, more transparent, and more in touch with the needs of everyday citizens.
So how does all this translate to the long term? Can Balen Shah's approach actually lead to lasting change in Kathmandu?
Well, that's the million-dollar question.
Mhm.
While the initial energy and enthusiasm are undeniable, the real test will be whether he can maintain this momentum and navigate the complex political landscape.
Right, he's facing some serious challenges. Entrenched interests, limited resources,
Yeah.
and the immense pressure of expectations.
Yeah, the sheer magnitude of the problems Kathmandu faces can't be overstated. Poverty, pollution, inadequate infrastructure. These are issues that have plagued the city for generations.
Yeah, it's a daunting task for any leader, let alone one who's relatively new to the political arena.
And it's important to remember that even with the best of intentions, change doesn't happen overnight. There will be setbacks, compromises,
Yeah.
and unforeseen obstacles.
So what do we look for to gauge his success? What are the key indicators that his approach is working?
I think it's less about specific metrics and more about observing the overall direction. Is there a tangible shift in the way the city is governed? Are citizens feeling more empowered and engaged? Are we seeing concrete improvements in areas like infrastructure and quality of life?
Those are good points. It's about looking beyond the immediate headlines and assessing the long-term impact on the fabric of the city itself.
Exactly. And it's a story that's still unfolding. We need to give it time and observe how things evolve. But one thing's for sure. Balen Shah has injected a much-needed dose of energy and hope into Kathmandu's political scene. Whether he ultimately succeeds or fails, he's already made a significant impact.
Yeah, he's certainly shown that it's possible to challenge the status quo, even in a system as deeply entrenched as Kathmandu's.
And that in itself is a powerful message. It's a reminder that change can come from unexpected places, and that sometimes all it takes is one person with a vision and the courage to act on it.
And what about the ripple effect beyond Kathmandu? Could Balen Shah's story inspire a new generation of leaders to step up and challenge the old ways of doing things?
That's certainly a possibility. His story resonates with a global yearning for change, particularly among younger generations who are disenchanted with traditional politics.
His use of technology and social media to connect with citizens, his willingness to be transparent, his emphasis on action over rhetoric, these are all things that appeal to a generation that's grown up in a digital world.
It's a new way of thinking about leadership, one that's less about hierarchy and control and more about collaboration and empowerment.
So while Balen Shah's story is still being written, the early chapters suggest that he represents something much larger than himself.
He's a symbol of the changing face of leadership, a reflection of the hopes and anxieties of a world grappling with complex challenges. And whether he succeeds or fails in the long run, his journey is one worth watching closely.
And on that note, let's shift our focus to the broader implications of his leadership style and what it might mean for the future of Kathmandu and beyond. So we've talked about the impact of Balen Shah's policies and the way he's challenged traditional notions of leadership.
Yeah. But there's another layer to this story that I think is worth exploring. The impact he's having on civic engagement in Kathmandu.
Right. So what are you seeing in terms of how citizens are responding to his leadership?
Well, there's definitely a heightened sense of awareness and participation. People are paying more attention to local politics, they're more vocal about their concerns, and they're more willing to hold their leaders accountable.
Do you think that's directly attributable to Balen Shah, or is it part of a larger trend?
I think it's a bit of both. Globally, we're seeing a rise in civic activism, fueled by social media and a growing distrust of traditional institutions. But Balen Shah has certainly tapped into that energy in Kathmandu. His approach, with its emphasis on transparency and citizen engagement, has emboldened people to get involved.
Right. His live streaming of municipal meetings, for example, has given people a direct window into the workings of government. It's made the process less opaque and more accessible.
Exactly. And that can be empowering when people feel like they have a voice, when they see that their input can actually make a difference. It can lead to a more engaged and active citizenry.
So in a way, Balen Shah's legacy might not just be about the specific policies he implements, but about the broader cultural shift he's helping to create.
That's a really important point. His impact might be felt most profoundly in the way he's reshaping the relationship between citizens and their government. If he can foster a culture of transparency, accountability, and participation, that could have lasting benefits for Kathmandu, regardless of who holds office in the future.
Right. It's like he's planting seeds that could grow into a more robust and resilient democracy.
That's a great analogy. And it's important to note that this isn't just about Kathmandu. Balen Shah's story is resonating with people around the world who are hungry for change and looking for new models of leadership.
Right. He's part of a global movement of individuals who are challenging the status quo and reimagining what's possible in politics.
It's an exciting time to be witnessing this evolution of leadership. And while there are certainly challenges ahead for Balen Shah and for Kathmandu, there's also a sense of hope and possibility that's palpable.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into the world of Balen Shah, what's the key takeaway you'd like listeners to ponder?
I think the biggest question is this a fleeting moment of disruption? Or is it the beginning of a genuine transformation in how Kathmandu and perhaps other cities are governed? Only time will tell. But it's a story worth following closely.
Absolutely, and that's what makes this so fascinating. We're not just observing a political career, we're witnessing a social experiment unfold in real time.
It's a reminder that change can come from unexpected places, and that even in a world that often feels stuck, there's always room for innovation and evolution.
Well said. So to all our listeners out there, keep your eyes on Kathmandu. Balen Shah's story is far from over. And who knows what ripple effects it might create in the years to come.
And on that note, we'll wrap up this deep dive. Thanks for joining us on this journey into the heart of Kathmandu's political landscape.
Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep the conversation going.